I'm going to put out, Maria will get in the next couple of weeks a substantial list of not just the companion plants, including the herbs, but also the ones, more importantly, the enemies of each other. Okay, so you'll be getting that. So I wanted to touch on the fact that herbs are important to us, not just in the garden, but also for our health and that. Okay, so they do make a huge difference to the taste of food, and it's on the field we are steadily making more areas available for our herbs, because just the smell of the herbs is enough to make most people feel a bit happy with themselves. Okay, so we've most people can grow herbs in their gardens in just a small space, quite often just in pots. They're very good to smell and for the taste of various foods, and also you can make oils and vinegars out of them. So I'm going to, with the next slide, I'm going to start talking to you about the different types of herb that we can grow. So we go with my top 10 herbs are, I'll start with basil. It's a tender annual. So in most of the British Isles, apart from maybe in Cornwall and they will tend to die off during the winter months. If you have them in pots, what I tend to do, I've got mine in pots and I bring them in, I put them into a greenhouse or into a shed, and they quite happily will overwinter that way. The herbs must be planted in fertile soil and receive as much warmth as light as possible. They are a Mediterranean plant, so they do very well in semi-dry conditions and with a lot of sun and a lot of heat. They repel flies, especially white fly. They can improve the flavour of tomatoes, and they grow well next to oregano and parsley. So you can have all three into one pot if you haven't got very much space. Basil actually originates from India, and that's why it's tender in this country. But in the Mediterranean, it survives much better because they have much drier and warmer summers. Sage is also a Mediterranean plant. That's a very low-growing shrub, and you can pick them all year. It is a very good evergreen. It's good for most dishes, but also it's very good if you're doing flower arranging, things like that, because the shape and the texture of the leaf makes it really, really good to combine with flowers in vases. You can get green. I was just going to say on to rosemary. Rosemary, again, is an evergreen shrub. Comes from the Mediterranean. There are quite a few different varieties now, and you can have them as almost flowering shrubs as well. They're the white, pink, purple, and the blue forms. You can eat the flowers as well as using the actual leaves itself. You can take cuttings in the spring and also hardwood cuttings in late autumn, and they will overwinter, and then you can plant them out. You can plant them near cabbages and beans and carrots, and this deters flies and beetles. They're very, very good in breads. I use a lot of my rosemary in my bread I make. You also use them in a lot of other dishes as well. Chives are native to the British Isles. They're one of the onions. They very, very low maintenance, easy to spread. They will, if you put them in a pot, they won't spread so much, and what can happen is they can slowly starve themselves because they need a lot of soil, but the roots can kind of overcome the soil. Okay, so if you have got them in the pot, it's best to take them out every couple of years, split them down, and then repot them so you get more chives that way. As part of the onion family, they are very good at inhibiting most insects that attack our plants, especially things like black fly, green fly, and also mealybug, which if anyone has tried to grow peppers, that can be quite a nasty pest as well. Mint. Most gardens, I think, will try and grow a little bit of mint. It is very evasive, so we need to put it in a pot or a container of some type. What I tend to do is I've got a terracotta pot and I planted in that, but I sink the pot up to the rim of the pot itself, and that means that the mint doesn't get overheated during the summer, and it stays fairly damp and moist as well, but it won't try and spread through the rest of the garden. There are many varieties of mint, including spearmint, lemon, licorice mint, apple mint, peppermint, pineapple, and also chocolate mint. At the field, we are also growing Corsican mint, which is a very, very fine leaf, but very, very strong, and eau de cologne mint. All of these are very good in lots of different foods. Mint always goes well with potatoes, but are also very good for oils and things like that. When we move on to coriander, again, coriander, it started off on the southern slopes of the Himalayas, but it's very, very, it's used substantially in Indian cuisine, but also in the Mediterranean. It appreciates very fertile soil and a sunny position. However, it will tolerate shade, especially partial shade, but it's very good at standing up to dry conditions. It's a very short-lived tender plant in this country. Again, if you have it in pots, you can take it into the greenhouse or into a shed. I wouldn't take it into the house because that would be too hot and it would probably kill the coriander off. The other alternative is if you grow it as an annual, and then you collect the flowers and the seeds once it starts to flower, and then you can use the seeds for either resowing or for culinary use as well. The whole plant of coriander is edible, so that's the seeds, the flowers, the stems, the leaves, and the roots, if you fancy eating coriander roots. And it will all taste of coriander. The whole plant tastes of coriander. If you're going to grow from seeds, and sow seeds in rows or in pots, and cut the leaves as often as you can, because the more you cut it, it's one of those annuals that the more you cut, the more growth it will produce. Okay. If you grow coriander next to peppers and chilies, then it improves the flavour of both plants. Okay. Parsley. There are two distinct types of parsley. There's the Mediterranean, or what we have, the curly-leaved parsley, which is it's strong but not overly strong. And then there's the French parsley. French parsley was discovered by the Norman, and it's you don't need to use quite so much, and it's got a stronger flavour. They are hardy biennials, and you sow the seed each year for the following, and it will kind of produce a better plant the following year. Okay. If you plant it near corn and tomatoes, it helps repel flea beetle. And you can grow parsley with just about any other herb, so it's very good if you've got a sink or anything like that. It's a good one to grow in, and it won't. If you keep it trimmed back, it won't kind of overload the other herbs at all. It's tarragon. There's two types of tarragon. There's French tarragon and Russian tarragon. We have both types in the fields that were grown from seed this year. Although it is a perennial, it can rot during our wet winters, and so it's good if you've got it in the home. It's best to have it in a pot so you can keep it a little bit drier. A plant needs to fertile soil, and it needs to be really quite a warm area. Divide the plants in the spring, and it's one of these plants that when it does seed, the seed doesn't normally produce really good plants. So it's the best way to propagate tarragon is from either root cuttings or by dividing the plants. And the last one I've done is, oh no, I haven't, I've done two. We've got common thyme. Again, there's about 60 different types of thyme. Although some of them are named varieties, but they all give that quite often a kind of slightly lemony taste to most food that you put them in. Okay, they are very low maintenance. They're easy to propagate. You just propagate from cuttings. I did a demonstration in the field about how easy they are. Okay. Creeping thyme, it tends to hug the ground quite a lot. So it's very good at a ground cover plant. So it's good for putting in amongst other things that, to stop weed growth. It's also quite, it's resistant to slugs and snails. About one of the only plants in the world that slugs and snails really don't like. So if you want a lawn of it, then that's really good as well. Okay, plant near cabbages because it deters cabbage worm, but it can also be grown with just about every other herb. So it's another good one to put in pots with other herbs completely. And the last one is dill. I picked some dill from my garden just now. Dill, again, it's a tender biennial, so tender perennial, so it will come up every year, but it will die off during the winter. The thing about dill is that, again, it's another one of these herbs that every part of dill tastes and smells of dill, so even the seeds. Okay. It's very good with things like fish, but also with potatoes. It's best, if you're going to propagate it, it's best propagated from seed. Cuttings don't really take anything at all. And it's very good at getting rid of flies. So if you're pestered with flies or ants in the house, then a pot of dill next to the back door is very, very good as well. Okay, so that's my 10 herbs. So when we come to looking at actual herbs themselves, all herbs like full sun or partial shade. Okay? They need watering very, very occasionally. If you try and water them too much and they become waterlogged, they will die, because the crowns of herbs are underneath the soil and not above the soil. Then any waterlogging will will kill off the crown. The thing about them is to pick them regularly. Keep cutting the herbs as much as you can. Even if you're not going to use them, then you can always freeze them as well if you're going to do that. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. Most herbs will overwinter, apart from, as I said, coriander and dill, because they will die off. If you keep them in pots, as I said before, then you can take the plants into the greenhouse. They may not flourish, but you've got a plant ready for the following year. Or you can just collect seed, or we can take cuttings. Okay. All the annuals just re-sow every year. They don't cost very much. When it comes to propagating from cuttings, most of the shrubby plants, rosemary, lavender, sage, marjoram, and thyme, can all be taken from cuttings. They're very, very simple. When it comes to tarragon, when you're taking cuttings of tarragon, then we put that in just a glass of water, and the roots, as soon as the roots form, then you can then pot those up, and then all the others are best grown from seed, and the fresher the seed, the better as well. So the next few slides show you how we take the cuttings. So always select a good stem and a non-flowering stem, and cut it below a node. And this is the leaf stalk where the leaves come out from the stem. Pull off the lower half of the leaves, and you can see in the picture how much you're taking off. If it's quite a tender plant as well, you can always take out the tip of the plant, and insert them in pots of compost, and it needs to be good, well-drained compost, so with a bit of sand in it. Water and cover them. I'd recommend cover them with a plastic bag, and then secure the bag with an elastic band. And then it takes about 3 to 4 months for the roots to really establish. And then once the roots are established, then plant them out where you want to, either in the garden or in pots. So the last thing I want to look at is uses of herbs for cooking. So they can be used for, as I said there, sauces, dressings, vinaigrettes, toppings, and also in all types of manner of food. I use quite a lot of herbs in the bread making as well, because it does liven up, even boring things like bread. It's good for medicines. Quite a lot of the herbs that we have are used in medicines. They're also good for things for other plants. So things like borage, comfrey, we can use those as foliar feeds for other plants. And then when you are picking, if you pick too many, then you can make oils and vinegars out of them. And they're very, very easy. It's just a case of adding them to, chopping them up, adding them to the oil and vinegar. And then after a few days, then draining off the oil into a bottle. And it's always very nice to have one sprig of the herb in the bottle as well, so you know exactly what they are. If you've got quite a few over, you can also freeze herbs as well. So get an ice cube tray, cut the herbs up very, very fine, put them into the ice cube tray, then add olive oil or vegetable oil. The oil will freeze, and then you can take out the cubes and use those as herbs at any time of the year. They're very good companions. We've spoken before about the basil and tomato pairing. The basil protects the tomato, and also they supplement each other with flavour. Scents. I've got a handful of herbs on the table next to me here at the moment. and I'm slowly becoming intoxicated by the smell. I've got some lavender, and I've got some lovage as well. And also you can use them for decorating. As I said before, I've just put them into a vase of flowers, or a vase of herbs themselves. It's really, really nice. One herb I haven't mentioned is lovage, and that's very good for fish and potatoes. It's just okay. Thank you very much.